Right, so a shift has come in the democracy narratives of the new Syrian administration of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, and the only conclusion you can draw from it really compared to the initial speeches and proclamations they'd made in the immediate aftermath of the fall of Assad, that now they've got their feet under the table and become quite used to their new surroundings, they've decided they quite like it there and quite fancy staying. You see, when Abu Muhammad Al-Jolani, now preferring to go by his birth name of Ahmed Al-Sharaa, blew into Damascus and took over, he was saying there would be elections coming in, well, around March of the new year. That a quick democratisation of Syria was on the cards, would now come after more than 50 years of the Assad family ruling. But now he's singing from a different hymn sheet. Now he's saying he thinks it'll be 4 years before there are any elections. And combined with an increased level of persecution of ethnic minorities, including, notably, amongst Christian populations, I fancy many a Syrian might now be wondering if they are actually better or worse off now than they were under Assad. Right, so all of a sudden the expected elections coming in Syria were due to come in a few months' time, as we were told by the new HTS leadership, are now not coming. Well, who's surprised at a bunch of Israel-backed Al-Qaeda and ISIS leftovers not keeping their word, eh? But this is the news that dropped yesterday, coming from the new de facto and very much unelected leader of Syria, Ahmed Al-Sharaa, better known as the terrorist Al-Jolani, once upon a time a man with a $10 million bounty on his head, now lifted as the US have decided to do politics with this head chopper instead, now that he's wearing a suit. All of this came out in an interview Al-Sharaa did with the Saudi news outlet Al Arabiya, saying that the constitution he was creating with Turkish involvement would likely take about 3 years now to complete, and that free and fair elections with a proper census taken of the population of Syria would take 4 years. And so the question left on everyone's lips is, why does he think all of this will take that long? Surely there are records of census returns and such things as that already done after all. Well, for one, Al-Sharaa now has power, doesn't he, and likely doesn't want to let it go. A few months after forcibly seizing control of the country, which will have made a lot of Syrians nervous, isn't enough time to win them over and bring them around to supporting his political organisation. It gives Al-Sharaa time to consolidate his power base, exert some influence of his particular brand of conservative Islam. HTS's base was in the Idlib area of Syria. It is a very religious conservative area that they will now want to spread around the country they now control, following a strict form of Sunni Islam called Salafism, which is closely aligned to the Wahhabism doctrine practiced in Saudi Arabia. So inherently, that doesn't allow for a lot of freedom of worship or expression. It is very much a tightening up of such freedoms instead. It'll take time to convince some people of this change on one hand, and time to deal with others who simply will not accept it at all. But I'll come back to that point in a moment. A close alignment in terms of religion. Probably no surprise that Al-Sharaa sees Saudi Arabia as having significant influence on the future of Syria. Very much a do as you're told or lose your head impression as that gives. But equally, the Saudis have good relations with the West based on oil. Syria would quite like said relations on that basis as well. The US and Kurdish factions in the north control their oil fields already anyway. And of course, they still want to be besties with Israel too. Let's never forget that bit. Despite their continued invasion of Syrian territory, another point HTS needs to address meaningfully if they're going to win the people they purport to rule over to their side and their way of thinking, though there's scant sign of that happening just yet. Another issue that HTS needs to resolve is that of the warring between Turkey and the Syrian Kurds in the north of Syria, those same Kurds who, along with the US, control the oil fields. Because on one hand, Turkey is involved in drawing up this new constitution with Syria, now a 3-year project we're being told. But equally, Al-Sharaa wants the Kurds to be integrated into his future vision for Syria as well. And one reason he's saying that is the fact that they are, of course, US-backed. He wants to be on both sides of that conflict. Good terms with Turkey and the US and the Kurds. He wants the US to lift sanctions on Syria after all. So this is a problem that definitely needs to be resolved. Turkey are not currently invading Syria themselves. It's been mooted, but they haven't done it yet, though they have been lending air support to their proxies who are fighting the Kurds, the so-called Syrian National Army. Not the same as the pro-Assad Syrian Army. The word national is key here, though confusion is obviously natural. But they're a bunch of disparate militias and mercenaries, basically. I think it's a case of which is more important to Turkey, having a say in the future of Syria or fighting the Kurds, who they have an historic beef with. that I detailed in another recent video. And you figure even Erdogan would see the logic of sticking by HTS here and leaving the Kurds to them. Al-Sharaa has said he wants the Kurds to become an integral part of Syrian society. He has stated clearly that he doesn't want any division in the country. But unfortunately, the deeds of his terrorist gang passing themselves off as legitimate government is saying the total opposite right now. On one hand, there's a significant number of Assad loyalists still fighting HTS. And in recent days, some 300 arrests have been made, though no high-ranking outstanding pro-Assad rebels, as I suppose they now are, have been captured. Those detained have included the likes of interpreters, or former fighters and soldiers, and lower-ranking officers. It's not known how many of these may still be active, but clearly their ongoing attacks give an impression of anything but a stable new administration. Undermining the wish for there to be no division shtick further is that there's been a report from the Iraqi Christian Foundation, a human rights and political rights organisation which lobbies for protection of Christians in Iraq and across the Middle East, and also who provide humanitarian aid to Christians in Iraq and Syria who have fled genocide. Their report detailed an operation by HTS goons who had moved in on the Christian town of Malula and ordered everyone out. An act of ethnic cleansing taking place, a war crime. It isn't the first time either that HTS have attacked Malula either, as prominent Middle East journalist Richard Medhurst spelt out in a tweet saying, "I've been to Malula more times than I can count. It is very special as it's one of the only places on earth where people still speak Aramaic, the language that Jesus spoke. Al-Sharaa, Jolani and his Al-Nusra terrorists attacked it in 2013, destroyed the statue of the Virgin Mary and kidnapped the nuns." Medhurst there had actually quote-tweeted a comment made by the Iraqi Christian Foundation themselves on Twitter, which said, "Syrian Christians in the ancient Christian town of Malula, Syria, are being threatened to leave the town by the Al-Qaeda ISIS terrorists that have taken over Syria. An ethnic cleansing is happening in this ancient Christian town where Aramaic is still spoken. Pray for the Christians of Syria." The World Council of Arameans has also joined with the concerns of the Iraqi Christian Foundation over matters in Malula as well. Arameans, or Syriacs, are the oldest indigenous race of people in Syria. Aramaic speakers, as you might have guessed, and as such, Malula is essentially one of theirs. And in the face of 80% of Christians having fled Malula, they put out an article on their website dated the 26th of December detailing the crisis faced there, which had now at that point been ongoing for 2 weeks. An excerpt of that reads, "Over the past week, Islamists have intensified efforts to seize Christian-owned farmland and homes, pushing the last Arameans in Malula to the brink. Last night at 2 a.m., a Christian farmer defending his property faced a life-or-death situation when armed attackers arrived. After being fired upon, he returned fire in self-defense, resulting in the death of one attacker. Despite his actions being backed by clear surveillance footage handed over to Damascus police, extremists are now demanding his surrender for retaliation and openly calling for the ethnic cleansing of Malula's remaining Aramean Christian population. Curiously, Malula has been cut off from the outside world with no internet or phone connection for hours, leaving its residents isolated and vulnerable. Meanwhile, social media channels are flooded with calls for the expulsion of Christians, intensifying the fear amongst the remaining population. All its Aramean residents, especially women, children and the elderly, are deeply afraid to surrender their arms, fearing they will be slaughtered if they do so. This isn't respect for all religions. This isn't peaceful transition. This is continuation of terrorism, where HTS are more interested in attacking Christians and other minorities than unifying with them and ending division, than stopping Israel even from still bombing Damascus for that matter as well and seizing more territory. A leadership like this isn't going to unify anything. But now saying they're here to stay, like it or lump it, for the next 4 years to people who had no say in their takeover to begin with? Yeah, that's going to go down swimmingly going forwards, isn't it? If HTS aren't going to do or say anything about Israel, the same cannot be said for the Houthis or Hamas now, as they've commenced rocket attacks on Israel with Benjamin Netanyahu having collapsed ceasefire talks yet again that he has never been an honest broker in. Israel thought Hamas had no rocket capabilities anymore though, but not only have they been proven wrong, but where they've been able to fire them from has shaken Israel to its core. Get all the details of that story in this video recommendation. Here's your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. It all helps support the channel, is very much appreciated, and I hope you keep coming back for more daily content, to which end I hope I will catch you on the next vid. Cheers folks.